So, what do you do in a worst case scenario like this? And you've been tasked with going out into this area, responding to this event, and either doing a search and rescue operation or a cleanup operation or something like that. And there are no visual cues. There's no way. How do you describe areas other than just one massive debris field? And this may go on for miles. And so how do you make sense out of this? And as and if you're responsible for a team, a search and rescue team, how do you deploy those resources in some kind of a logical fashion? And how do you know what areas have been covered and still need to be covered, and what kind of information they want to record when they're in the field, and how do they communicate from the field back to a command center about what they're doing? Well, if you can overlay some kind of a grid on top of this, now you've got ways of breaking it up into arbitrary areas that have a fixed location and a known location. And so if we have grid lines like the 8012, 8013, and then vertically 0115, 0116, you can see that there's a logical order to this and a numbering system so that we could name the square in the middle there by its lower left corner, 8012, 0115. And the one next door would be 8013, 0115. And so now we start to make sense out of that. And then if we can couple that with maps that show all of the key resources, vulnerable population, and critical infrastructure within our area, now we can navigate to locations on the ground using GPS on our smart devices to be able to get to those locations, to be able to know which squares we're in so that we can then relay that back to a command center and so on. And so it's really about teaching people to use maps, and maps should have grid lines on them. And then we look at the numbers in the margins that name each of those grid lines. And we simply instruct people to read, write, then up. And based on that, on the lower left corner of one of those grid squares that are formed by the lines, we can name that, in this case, 7556. So we read right to 75, up to 56. And now we're at the lower left corner of a grid square that's bounded by those grid lines. And then we really want to have some kind of a system that is that fits within a national context and beyond. And that means that we're able to create name grids and talk about these grids in a much larger context, which makes it all interoperable across jurisdictions, and means that when we bring in resources from outside, we'll be speaking the same language when we're describing these locations. And this is the U.S. National Grid. The U.S. National Grid is a national standard, has been a national standard since 2001. It was adopted by several federal agencies. FEMA and DHS are the emergency management side of the federal government. NGA and USGS are the mapping side of the federal government. Both sides have adopted this. It's also been adopted by several states. I list some there. There are others. This is, in fact, the U.S. National Grid is the military grid referencing system, which has been around since World War II. It's taught to all military recruits in basic training. They have an interoperable way of describing locations, and it can be taught very easily and taught just in time to first responders. But it also means that the National Guard and all NATO forces speak the same language of location. The military, all we've done with the military grid referencing system is say that we're adopting that as the national grid for the United States. So it's nothing new. It's been around since World War II. It served the purposes in the military very well. And of course, we can see lots of parallels between military operations and emergency management operations. And it's all based on UTM coordinates. Universal Transverse Mercator Coordinate System was developed in the 1940s. It provides a uniform coordinate system for the entire Earth. It's also been adopted by the National Search and Rescue Committee. We can see right here in their Land Search and Rescue Addendum, it is the primary location referencing system for all land search and rescue operations. If we look at that a little bit closer here, we're showing the foundation of the U.S. national grid for the entire U.S. And if you zoom in, you see these alphabetic or these squares that are labeled with alphabetic names, and these represent the largest component of the grid system. And generally, we're working at a scale that is much more local than what we're looking at here. And so that allows us to start to create some efficiencies. So if we break down the U.S. National Grid coordinate format, this is the full designation, full 15 characters describing a location to 1 meter. And then there's the corresponding UTM coordinates for that. And we can start to see the similarities. The numeric portion of U.S. National Grid is the part of the UTM coordinates from the 10,000th place down. And so we have the same number of digits in easting and northing, or X and Y. The first part is called a grid zone, and that corresponds to UTM zone 15. The next part is the 100,000 meter square, and that's how we're dropping off the 400,000 and the 4,900,000 in the UTM coordinates. And now we're just looking at the numeric portion, which is the easting or an X, and a northing, which is Y or up. And those numeric portion will always be in meters, between 0 and 99,999. And so again, if we look at the full U.S. National Grid designation, it's 15 characters. It can be maybe a little overwhelming, but we can start to see some efficiencies very quickly, because we can drop digits starting on the right to start to represent varying degrees of precision. So if we're only using 4 digits in X and Y, we're describing a location to a precision of 10 meters. 6 digits, it's 100 meters. 4 digits would be 1,000 meters. And based on the different requirements of the operation, we can choose which number of digits are necessary to describe a location. So for example, it may be just fine to use 4 digits to describe the location of a football field, because the helicopter is going to see the football field once they get within that vicinity, or anybody on the ground is going to find it similarly. Then we can also do local truncation. So if we remove the 15 Tango Victor Kilo from the left, we can describe, once we know that our area of operation is completely contained within that large area, we don't need to say it over and over and over. It would just be redundant. It's important that everybody knows about that, but we can simply say grid 8913-6438. And now we're describing a location to a precision of 10 meters within our local area of operation. What about alternatives? Well, we saw UTM coordinates. There's a full 16 characters required to be able to do that. And there's no concept of the truncation and precision. Local coordinate systems, there are state plane coordinate systems and county coordinates. Latitude, longitude. Latitude, longitude can actually be described in several different formats. You know, some people will simply say, well, why can't we just use GPS? Well, GPS gives us a location, but there are many ways of representing that location, different coordinate systems, different levels of accuracy and precision that come along with that. And when we're talking about latitude, longitude, we need to make sure that the person that's receiving our location description knows what format we're using. And if you're going to be describing this over radio transmission, it's very important that you use very specific terminology to make sure that that's read properly. So for example, the degrees, minutes, seconds, I would have to say 44 degrees, 49 minutes, 58.1 seconds north, 93 degrees, 08 minutes, 15.0 seconds west. And you have to, if you miss some of that, or if it gets misinterpreted, that you're somehow saying degrees, minutes, decimal minutes, it could be 50 miles away. So it's very important. And the U.S. National Grid was really designed to eliminate confusion, reduce the chance of creating any kind of ambiguity, and make sure that we're also being very explicit in our locations, because we know there should always be the same number of digits in X and Y. And so once again, then what about lat long? The Earth is round, so degrees are not squares. There's some form of a trapezoid. And ultimately, because of the curvature of the Earth, the size of a degree varies depending on where you are. So at the equator, 1 degree is approximately 69 miles, both latitude and longitude. But longitudes get smaller as you get towards the poles. 1 degree of longitude is 50 miles in Minnesota, for example, at about approximately 45 degrees latitude. And then distance calculations are difficult. So 10 meters is approximately 0.5 seconds of longitude at 45 degrees latitude, but it's 0.3 seconds of latitude, degrees of latitude at 45 degrees. So it becomes very difficult to visualize. Of course, there are calculators that can do all of that, but it's not very intuitive. There are maps available for the entire U.S. that support the U.S. National Grid. This is the USGS US Topo series. They actually have PDF files that you can download. Here you can see an air photo, but there are also contours. They're 7.5 minutes by 7.5 minutes, 1 to 24,000 scale, approximately 20 meters of accuracy. And you can use something like these grid readers that are available to be able to measure within each of those grid squares on the map. And maps can come at different sizes and scales, but they should always have a grid, and the grid that should be on them is a UTM grid, which supports U.S. National Grid. There are mobile apps that also support the U.S. National Grid. Remember that U.S. National Grid and Military Grid Reference System are synonymous for all practical purposes. So you need to go into your settings on your GPS app and find the setting to read the coordinates in MGRS. Some will say USNG as well, but there will be settings there. And once you do that, you're able to navigate using U.S. National Grid. There are also other websites and training sites out there. It may not say U.S. National Grid, but remember, it's synonymous with the military grid. And so there's a lot of training out there for military purposes and backcountry trekking as well, that all applies to learning how to use the U.S. National Grid.